What's up, movie fans? Okay, guys, so this is the final episode of the DC Animated Movie Universe review series that I've been doing, where I've been reviewing the shared universe of DC movies that has 16 movies in it. In the first 3 parts, I reviewed 4 movies each part. Today I am reviewing Reign of the Supermen, Batman Hush, Wonder Woman Bloodlines, and the final movie in the entire franchise, Justice League Dark Apocalypse War. So let's just get right into it with Reign of the Supermen. Now, the plot of this movie is that 6 months after the death of Superman, a bunch of other Superman-like heroes start emerging and kind of trying to, replace Superman, and Lois Lane starts investigating into each of these mysterious new Supermen. I'm gonna talk about everything I liked about it, everything I disliked, and then my final score. First off, I really liked how this movie continues off of the death of Superman. This is a direct sequel to the death of Superman. It managed to continue, everything that movie set up really well. How it developed Lois Lane was really well done, with her, still mourning Superman's death. There were, some details in the death of Superman that when I was watching that movie, I thought that they were just, honestly, kind of unnecessary. That entire plotline about the Excalibur satellite thing, I'm not gonna say too much for spoiler reasons. And when I was watching that in the death of Superman, I was like, this is kind of weird and out of place. It ended up actually having a purpose for this movie. I also really like a lot of the twists in this movie. Every single one of the Supermen has this mysterious thing going on with them, and each one of them has a big twist in the movie. So I'm gonna talk about each of the Supermen. I'm not gonna spoil that much. My least favorite of the Supermen would be the Eradicator Superman. I thought that his twist was really good, and I genuinely, he was mysterious, and I didn't really know where they were going with it. So I was actually pretty surprised when they revealed everything with him. He just wasn't very interesting, though. Then after that, my third favorite would be Steel. His twist was incredibly predictable, and I don't think they were really trying to hide it. I feel like it was pretty obvious. I thought that Steel was a pretty interesting character. He was kind of just a regular guy who saw Superman die and was like, well, this world needs a Superman, so he decided to be the new Superman. I thought that was pretty interesting. Then my second favorite is Superboy. His twist is actually revealed within the first 10 minutes. It's not really that big of a twist, so I'm just gonna spoil it. He was a clone of Superman created by Lex Luthor. That's revealed almost immediately. So I thought that his entire, character arc about not really wanting to work for Lex Luthor and, trying to decide what the right thing to do is, I thought that was interesting. And then my favorite Superman is the Cyborg Superman, who ended up being the main villain of the movie. And I thought that he was really interesting. His backstory and the twists about him, I didn't see them coming. They were pretty shocking. And I thought that his motivation was great, and I thought that he was a pretty great villain. So overall, there are a lot of elements of the Reign of the Supermen that I really liked. However, there is one thing that I disliked. Out of all of the movies in the DC AMU, this is definitely the one that moves the slowest. It spends a lot of time kind of building everything up, and I thought that some parts of it were kind of boring. But overall, I did like Reign of the Supermen, and I actually think I liked this a bit more than the death of Superman, so I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. Moving on to the next movie, we have Batman Hush. Now, the plot of this movie is that this mysterious vigilante bad guy named Hush shows up, and Batman has to team up with Catwoman in order to beat him. Starting with everything I liked about this movie, Batman and Catwoman's relationship in this movie I thought was great. Like, this added a lot more to Batman's character arc. Like, throughout this entire universe, this 16-film universe, he is easily the character that has gotten focused on the most. Out of the 16 movies in this universe, he's in 12 of them. And I thought that, like, this added a lot more to his character. And I also really liked Catwoman. I thought that their entire dynamic together was really interesting. I really liked Hush. I thought that he was a pretty threatening and terrifying villain. I did get it spoiled for me before I watched this movie. I read a few too many things on the internet, and as a result, I got the big twist about who Hush is. So I knew that before I watched the movie, unfortunately. I still really liked Hush, and I thought that his motivation, like, as it gets revealed, I thought that that was really good, so I liked him. I thought he was a great villain. And I also really like how this movie focuses a lot on Batman's rogues gallery. Hush isn't the only villain in this movie. It has a lot of Batman's rogues gallery that shows up, such as Bane, Scarecrow, the Joker, Poison Ivy, like a bunch of Batman's villains who we haven't really seen in this universe show up, and I really liked a lot of them. So that's everything I liked about this movie. Now, things I disliked. When the big twist reveal happens and you find out who Hush is, I thought that he becomes significantly less cool. Before you know who Hush is, he's pretty terrifying and he's pretty intimidating. Afterwards, he honestly kind of came across as whiny. I like seeing all of Batman's rogues gallery. It would have been cooler if we would have seen more of them, like particularly the Joker. The Joker has less screen time in this movie than he does in Suicide Squad. That's a shame, because the Joker is absolutely hilarious in this movie. Like, this is one of my favorite interpretations of the Joker I've ever seen, because he's just so funny. Like, I don't know what made him so funny. He was just a really funny character. My final thing that I disliked about this movie is that Thomas Elliot is apparently Bruce Wayne's, like, childhood best friend. Why hasn't he ever been brought up before in this universe? Like, I feel like we would have seen him before. If Bruce Wayne had a best friend, like, part of Batman's character is that he doesn't have any friends. So if he did have a best friend, I feel like they should have mentioned him sooner. Now, I know he had a purpose in the comic book Batman Hush. For some reason, they changed that in this movie, so I don't get what the point of keeping him in this movie was. Why didn't you just cut him out? So overall, I liked Batman Hush, but remember when I ranked all of the MCU movies and when I was talking about Avengers Age of Ultron, I mentioned I don't really know why I don't like that movie, but I just don't really like it that much. Same thing with this movie. I don't really like Batman Hush that much, but I don't really know why. I like it, it's just not that good. So I'm gonna give it like a 7 out of 10. I don't know, it's weird to me. So moving on, we have Wonder Woman Bloodlines. Starting with everything I liked about this movie, the plot of this movie is that Wonder Woman has to fight this, like, team of villains called Villainy Incorporated or whatever it was. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Like, a bunch of her villains team up, and they're trying to find Themyscira. And so Wonder Woman's trying to find Themyscira first, because apparently when somebody leaves Themyscira, like, their memory of that island just completely disappears. So yeah, it's convoluted, but like that's the plot of this movie. starting with everything I liked, I really liked Wonder Woman's, like, backstory and her character arc in this movie, because she's been kind of underdeveloped in this universe up to this point. Like, she hasn't really done that much. But here, I thought that she had a really interesting backstory, and I thought that, like, her entire character arc with, like, her mother and everything was really interesting. Another thing I really liked about this movie was the new character, who was kind of a side villain, Silver Swan. I thought that her entire arc was really interesting, and her motivation really made sense. She wasn't the main villain of the movie, but I thought that, like, she was still a pretty great character, and I really liked what they did with her. And that's basically everything I liked about this movie. I don't have a lot to say about Wonder Woman Bloodlines, so this is everything I disliked. The opening prologue of this movie, where we see, like, 5 years before this movie, when Wonder Woman, like, left Themyscira and everything, that takes up 20 minutes of this movie, which is only an hour and 20 minutes long. If they would have shortened that opening, I feel like it would have had a lot more time to develop, like, every plot line later in the movie. So I thought that it was just ridiculously long, and that they could have cut a lot out of there. My other problem with this movie is that, besides Silver Swan, none of the villains are very interesting. Like, Dr. Cyber, Dr. Poison, Cheetah, Giganta, the actual main villain of the movie, who is revealed later, who I'm not really gonna spoil, none of them were interesting. They were just, like, there. I didn't like this movie that much. Like, I'm still gonna give it a 7 out of 10. Like, Batman Hush and Wonder Woman Bloodlines, I like both of them. They're just not, like, that great. So then, there's one more movie on this entire universe. So this is the end of my series. This is the final movie in the whole DC AMU. It is Justice League Dark Apocalypse War. So the plot of this movie is, well, it's basically Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame in one movie and with DC. Like, that's basically the plot. Essentially, the Justice League goes after the big bad villain, Darkseid. A lot of them end up dying. So then we have this time jump. All of the surviving heroes have to team up and take one last stand against Darkseid. Like, maybe I revealed a bit too much there, but basically all of that is in the first 10 minutes of the movie. Let's start with everything I liked about this movie. This movie has a really high stakes story. Like, this feels like the final big battle in this universe. Like, it really feels like that. It has incredibly high stakes. It has this epic, big scale story. And I really like that. I think that that's necessary for the big finale of this universe, to have, like, an incredibly high stakes story. It lets you know from the very beginning of the movie, it's not messing around. Like, this is a serious movie. I also really like how this movie kind of, like, brings back a plot line from basically every other movie in this universe. Like, once again, it feels like the big conclusion because it makes you feel like it was worth it to watch all of these movies. And for me, somebody who, like, watched all of these movies so that I could do this series, I felt like afterwards, I felt like it was worth it. I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy I watched all of these. The big things, like, things that, like, really made me happy I watched all of these were, like, the conclusion to the storyline with Batman and Damian that's been going on since, like, the third movie in this franchise. Like, Batman and Damian's relationship has been a big part of this franchise, and they made me happy that I saw all of that in this movie. And I'm not gonna spoil how, but Justice League The Flashpoint Paradox, the very first movie in this franchise, ended up being very important for this movie. The entire Trigon storyline in Justice League vs. Teen Titans, Doomsday, and the death of Superman, like, all of that ended up being important to this movie. And I love that. Even smaller things, like Cyborg and Shazam were kind of friends in Justice League War and Justice League Throne of Atlantis. Like, they had some pretty great moments together, and they were, like, friends throughout those movies. There's a throwaway line in this movie where I was like, hey, that kind of fits with their entire friendship for this entire franchise. I loved how this movie acknowledged, like, stuff from previous movies. I thought that that was great. And because it acknowledges all of that, it ended up being the perfect conclusion to this franchise. This movie is really emotional, and it manages to conclude this franchise and put a period on, like, this entire sentence so well. That's everything I liked about this movie. There is one thing that I disliked, and apparently a lot of other people actually hate this movie for this. I'm not that far. Honestly, I didn't even think this was that big of a deal. But this movie kills off a lot of characters without, like, any acknowledgement. It's kind of ridiculous. And I feel like a couple of them deserved to be acknowledged more. A couple of the characters it killed off, I did think that they got proper acknowledgement, and I do think that some people are criticizing this movie more for the fact that it kills off characters than they actually are worried about, like, how it kills off characters. I'm fine that this movie kills off characters. I just think that a few of them should have gotten, like, better send-offs. So ultimately, that's really the only problem that I had with this movie. Otherwise, this is a really good movie. Justice League Dark Apokolips War is actually my favorite movie in this entire franchise. I am giving it a 9 out of 10. No other movie in this franchise has gotten that high yet. Batman vs. Robin came close. It got an 8.5, but ultimately Justice League Dark Apokolips War is the best movie in this franchise. Overall, I really liked the DC animated movie universe. I'm actually really happy that I watched all of these movies. Do I think it's better than the DCEU? I'm honestly not really sure. Yeah, I guess overall it is, but the DCEU hasn't really, like, concluded yet. This franchise is over, so I'm able to look at this as a whole picture, but I'm not able to do that with the DCEU yet. Overall, I really like the DCAMU. I'm happy I watched all of them. So yeah, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, leave a like and subscribe, and see ya, movie fans.